The lawyer's office smelled like old leather and lemon polish. I sat across from Mr. Henderson, my late uncle's attorney, trying to process what he'd just told me. 3,200 acres, I repeated, the number feeling impossible in my mouth, with a private lake. Mr. Henderson nodded, sliding a thick folder across his mahogany desk. Your Uncle Gerald was quite the character. The Blackwater Lake Ranch has been in your family since 1887. He had no children, and according to his will, it all goes to you, Sophie. I opened the folder, my hands trembling slightly. Photographs spilled out. A sprawling ranch house with a wraparound porch, endless pastures dotted with cattle, and a crystalline lake that stretched toward distant mountains. It looked like something from a Western movie. There's just one complication, Henderson said, his tone shifting. Of course there was. About 15 years ago, a development company built a luxury subdivision called Lakeview Estates on the eastern border of the property. They marketed it heavily as having exclusive lake access and waterfront living. I studied the map he pointed to. The subdivision sat just outside the ranch's boundary, a cluster of McMansions that looked absurdly out of place against the wild landscape. But the lake is entirely on my property, I said slowly. Correct. Your uncle allowed them limited access through an informal agreement. They could use a small section of the shoreline for recreation, but they've been expanding their interpretation of that agreement. 3 weeks later, I drove through the ranch gates for the first time as its owner. The Montana sky stretched endlessly above me, so blue it hurt to look at. I'd quit my marketing job in Seattle, sold most of my belongings, and decided to start fresh. At 32, I figured it was now or never. The ranch manager, Tom Whitfield, met me on the porch. He was in his 60s, weathered and lean, with kind eyes that crinkled when he smiled. Your uncle talked about you all the time, Tom said, shaking my hand firmly. He'd be glad you came. I hope I don't disappoint him, I admitted. I don't know the first thing about running a ranch. You'll learn, but there's something you should know right away. Tom's expression darkened. The HOA from Lakeview Estates has been causing problems. Big problems. He walked me down to the lake, and I understood immediately. The small beach area my uncle had designated for the subdivision's use, maybe 50 feet of shoreline, had transformed into something else entirely. There were permanent docks extending far into the water, a large boathouse with the HOA logo painted on it, jet skis tied up, and even a floating platform with diving boards. But that wasn't the worst part. They built that last month, Tom said, pointing to a gravel road that cut directly across ranch property, leading from the subdivision to the lake. I felt heat rising in my chest. They built a road through my land without permission? They claim they have an easement. They don't. Your uncle fought them on it, but he got sick before it went to court. As if summoned by our conversation, a black Lexus SUV came barreling down that very road, kicking up dust. It screeched to a stop near us, and a woman emerged. She was in her mid-50s, perfectly coiffed, wearing white linen pants that had no business being anywhere near a ranch. You must be the niece, she said, not offering her hand. I'm Patricia Cunningham, president of the Lakeview Estates HOA. Sophie Mitchell. And you're trespassing. Patricia's smile was thin and sharp. Actually, we have a legal right to lake access. It was part of the original development agreement. An agreement that specified a 50-foot section of beach, not building roads through private property or constructing permanent structures. The language was ambiguous. We've simply exercised our reasonable rights as neighboring property owners. She glanced at her watch, a gesture designed to communicate how little time I deserved. Our residents have invested millions in their homes based on the lake access promise. You can't simply revoke it. Watch me, I said quietly. Patricia's eyes narrowed. You don't want to go to war with us, Ms. Mitchell. We have resources. We have lawyers. What do you have? A ranch you inherited 3 weeks ago that you know nothing about running. She looked me up and down. I give it 6 months before you're bankrupt and begging us to buy you out. She drove away, leaving Tom and me in a cloud of dust. She's been trying to buy the ranch for years, Tom explained. If they owned it, they could subdivide the whole thing, turn it into 50 more luxury lots. Over my dead body, I thought. The next morning, I contacted Mr. Henderson. I want to enforce the original agreement and sue for damages from their unauthorized construction. That's going to be expensive and time-consuming, he warned. I know, but this is my family's land. I'm not letting them steal it piece by piece. The HOA's response came within days, not from lawyers, but from the county. Suddenly, I was hit with a wave of complaints and inspections. My fence was allegedly 6 inches over property line. It wasn't. My cattle were supposedly contaminating groundwater. They weren't. The ranch's access road needed costly environmental assessments. It didn't. Patricia had made good on her threat. She was using every bureaucratic weapon available. But she'd made a critical miscalculation. While going through my uncle's papers, I found something interesting. The development company that had built Lakeview Estates had signed an agreement in 2008 promising certain things to the county in exchange for permits, including maintaining natural wildlife corridors and limiting their footprint. The road they'd built through my property, it cut directly through a designated elk migration route. The expanded docks and boathouse, they violated the square footage limits they'd agreed to. I took everything to the county planning office, then to the state environmental agency. I documented every inch of their violations with photographs, surveys, and written records. 2 months into this battle, I received a visit from a different HOA board member, Robert Chun, who introduced himself as a treasurer and looked distinctly uncomfortable. "Ms. Mitchell, may I speak with you privately?" he asked. We sat on my porch with coffee. Robert didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Patricia doesn't speak for all of us," he began. "Several board members, myself included, voted against the road construction. We were told it was legal. We were told your uncle had given verbal permission before he died. That's not true. I know that now." He pulled out a folder. "This is everything. Meeting minutes, financial records, emails. Patricia authorized over $200,000 in construction without proper board approval. She told us it was for lake maintenance. She's been operating like a dictator. I studied the documents. They were damning. Patricia had essentially committed fraud against her own HOA members. Why are you giving me this?" I asked. Robert met my eyes. "Because this isn't what I bought into. I moved here for peace and quiet, not to steal someone's land. And because Patricia has been inflating our HOA dues to fund her personal vendetta against your family. A lot of residents are angry. The lawsuit I filed wasn't just against the HOA anymore. It named Patricia personally for fraud and trespass. The environmental violations I reported triggered a state investigation. The county put a stop work order on everything in Lakeview Estates until compliance could be verified. Patricia showed up at my ranch one evening, alone this time. Her perfection had cracked. Her hair was messy, her face drawn. "You're destroying property values for everyone," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "Families with children live there. You're hurting innocent people." "No," I said calmly. "You did that when you spent their money illegally and lied to them about having rights you never had. You could have approached me honestly. We could have negotiated a real easement, a proper agreement. Instead, you chose intimidation and theft. I'll fight this all the way to the Supreme Court if I have to. With what money? I have documentation that you've already drained the HOA's legal fund." Her face went white. She hadn't known I knew that. The final blow came from within her own community. The HOA members, once they learned what Patricia had done with their money and how she lied about the legal situation, held an emergency meeting and voted her out. They also voted to settle with me rather than continue fighting. The settlement was fair. I granted them a proper, legal easement to a designated section of the beach, the same 50 feet my uncle had originally allowed. They agreed to remove all unauthorized structures, restore the land where they built the road, and pay for damages. The total came to nearly $300,000. Patricia faced a separate lawsuit from her own HOA members for the money she'd misappropriated. 6 months after I first arrived at the ranch, I stood on my porch watching the sunset paint the lake in shades of orange and gold. The unauthorized docks were gone. The land was healing. The only people I could see on the beach were a couple of kids building sand castles in the designated area. their parents watching from lawn chairs. Tom joined me, handing me a beer. "Your uncle would be proud," he said. "I almost gave up a dozen times," I admitted. She was right about one thing. I had no idea what I was doing. But you learned. That's what matters. My phone buzzed with a text from Robertson. "Marina grand opening next month. We're doing it right this time. Fully permitted, proper location. You're invited." After Patricia's removal, the HOA had elected new leadership committed to being good neighbors. They'd worked with environmental agencies to build a small marina on their own property line, legally and properly designed. I smiled and texted back, "I'll be there. You know." Tom said, "There were times your uncle worried this place would die with him, that whoever inherited it wouldn't care enough to fight for it." I looked out across the vast expanse of land that was now mine. Not just property, but responsibility, legacy, home. "She thought I'd give up because I was new at this," I said. "But that's exactly why I couldn't quit. I had something to prove. And now—" I took a long drink of my beer, feeling the weight of the day's work on my muscles and the satisfaction of having protected what was mine. Now I'm not new anymore. The ranch stretched out before me. 3,200 acres of possibility. Patricia Cunningham had tried to take it through intimidation and illegal overreach. Instead, she lost everything: her position, her reputation, and her freedom to ever threaten my family's land again. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's simply refusing to back down.